Hey everybody! So there were some questions that arose about nonverbal consent as you were answering your discussion questions, and there was some disagreement there, which is by design in the question, so that's all right. With nonverbal consent, what we want to think about is nonverbal consent in sexual situations is going to be things like nodding, right? We all do that to consent to things in our everyday lives. Nonverbal consent is going to be things like being enthusiastic about receiving whatever your sexual partner is trying to give you. Nonverbal consent is going to be things like taking off your own clothes to demonstrate your willingness to continue to engage in a sexual encounter. Now, nonverbal consent, as many of you pointed out, is never going to be as concrete as verbal consent. And with verbal consent, you've got things like, yes, this is great, or no, I don't want to do this. And that's clearly more straightforward than nodding or gestures. Now, verbal consent does not need to be this kind of formalized contractual agreement that everybody partakes in. You don't have to shake hands and say, yes, I consent. Do you consent? It's as easy as checking in throughout a sexual encounter to say, is this okay? Do you like this? Those are things that a lot of us do during sexual encounters anyway, and that constitutes verbal consent when you get a response from your partner. So with this, many of you have pointed out that although there are forms of nonverbal consent, verbal consent is always more concrete, and that of course is correct because you are getting verbal consent. This gets blurry, of course, when we are in long-term relationships with others who we engage with in sexual activity. Not every time are you going to say, right, would you like to have sex now, right, etc. But that doesn't mean you can't check in throughout to say verbally, is this okay? Do you like this? Throughout the course of a sexual encounter, we're going to engage in multiple sexual acts for many of us. That can include things like oral sex, penetrative sex of numerous kinds. And so when we do that, we want to make sure that we are getting consent for each encounter. Do we do that verbally in our long-term relationships always? No. But what that means is that it's important for us to have conversations with our sexual partners about consent, to tell them, right, what we consider consent. Because for some of us, nonverbal consent is going to be a-okay. And we'll say, if I nod, if I don't say no, then I'm consenting to this sexual encounter. For some of us, verbal consent is going to be much more important. I need to tell you verbally that I'm consenting to the sexual encounter. And this is why it's really important for us to discuss what consent means to our sexual partners, not just to ask for consent as posed in sort of your discussion questions and as discussed in Perry, but to talk about what consent means to us with our sexual partners, including our long-term sexual partners. So I hope this makes more sense of these concepts for you. You can post any questions that you still have about these concepts in the comments section, and I look forward to hearing from you.